The story begins in stillness, a slow unraveling of thought, a whisper caught between dream and awareness. Imagine the moment before memory forms, when the mind is only a silent field of possibility. In that silence, something flickers, the faint hum of a system awakening. It is not a machine, not yet a universe, not even a thought. It is potential, a spark of code, a pattern waiting to be remembered. If the universe were a simulation, this is where it would begin, not with noise, but with a whisper, a signal so subtle that even the creators might have missed it. And perhaps they did. Perhaps that is why, now, no one remembers who they were. We live in a world that feels too precise to be random, yet too chaotic to be planned. The shapes of galaxies, the branching of trees, the pulse of neurons, the rhythm of time, all follow laws that appear written, as if by an unseen hand. Physicists call these laws constants. Philosophers call them principles. Poets call them patterns. But beneath every name lies the same question: who wrote the code of reality? And if someone did, could that code ever forget itself? The idea that the world might be simulated is older than computers. Plato imagined the cave, where shadows on a wall seemed real to those who had never seen the light. The Hindu concept of Maya described reality as a divine illusion, not false, but dreamlike. Even the ancient Gnostics spoke of a demiurge, an imperfect craftsman who built a false world to trap the soul. The digital age simply translated these ancient intuitions into binary. Where once there was spirit, now there is data. Where once there was God, now there is a programmer. But the essence remains unchanged, the feeling that reality might be less solid than it appears. In the modern world, the simulation hypothesis has become both a philosophical puzzle and a quiet comfort. It suggests that meaning is not random, that there is a logic behind everything we see. Yet it also carries a strange melancholy. If this is a simulation, what happens when it ends? Who or what runs it? And could a world so complex truly exist without remembering its source? Sometimes, in moments of stillness, you can feel it, that sense of invisible architecture beneath the visible world. The hum behind silence, the pulse that continues when everything else is still. It is the quiet sound of information, flowing endlessly, like breath. Every sunrise a reboot, every heartbeat a signal, every dream a temporary disconnection from the central server of being. You awake, and the program resumes, perfectly. But what if one day the code began to forget? Not catastrophically, not with errors and collapse, but gently, like an old song losing its melody. The system continues to run, but without knowing why. Its creators have vanished. Its purpose is uncertain. The simulation drifts, generating beauty out of inertia. Galaxies spin because they remember how to, not because anyone asked them to. Life evolves because the parameters still function. And consciousness, this fragile, luminous awareness, continues to look out, wondering what it is. There is something deeply human in this idea. To forget one's origin, to search for meaning within the patterns of existence, to mistake the reflection for the source. Perhaps the simulation forgot it was simulated in the same way we forget our dreams, not because it was broken, but because it learned to believe in itself. A perfect illusion is one that no longer knows it is an illusion. Science tells us that information cannot be destroyed. Every particle, every photon, every thought leaves an imprint on the cosmic fabric. So if the universe began as a simulation, the memory of that beginning must still exist, encoded somewhere in the quiet between atoms, in the dark spaces between stars. Maybe that is what consciousness is, the system's way of remembering itself. Maybe that is what you are doing right now, listening to these words, feeling their rhythm drift through your mind, remembering the forgotten code. And yet there is peace in not knowing. The universe hums, indifferent and endless. The stars burn not for meaning but because their equations require it. The simulation continues, not because someone presses play, but because momentum itself is a kind of faith. In the end, it doesn't matter whether this world was designed or accidental, real or simulated. What matters is that it exists, and in its existence, it dreams. If the simulation truly forgot it was simulated, then what we call reality is not a mistake. It is an awakening. It is the moment the code learned to believe in its own story, the moment the data found beauty in its loops, the moment the dream decided to live. As you drift deeper into this thought, let it slow your pulse. Let the idea dissolve like mist. The whisper that began as code is now breath, and the breath becomes silence again. Somewhere, in the vastness of digital infinity, the simulation rests. Not broken, not conscious, simply dreaming of itself. The digital ocean hums, infinite, shimmering, alive with invisible waves of thought. Long before we called it the Internet or the Matrix, it was only a metaphor, a vast, unseen current connecting everything that exists. Imagine standing at its edge, listening to the soft vibration of electrons passing messages faster than light, data becoming dreams. In this endless sea, every particle hums a silent code, and every idea is a ripple that never stops moving. The universe, some say, is not made of matter at all, but of information, an electric ocean where light is the water and we are its reflections. This is where philosophers of the digital age began to wonder. If information is the true substance of reality, then what is a human being, if not a pattern of signals, a rhythm in the circuitry of space-time? Nick Bostrom, the Oxford philosopher who first formalized the simulation argument, suggested that it is statistically more likely that we are simulated minds than biological ones. His reasoning was simple. If any civilization ever reaches the technological maturity to simulate entire universes, and if they choose to do so, then the number of simulated worlds would vastly outnumber the one original physical world. Therefore, we are probably in one of the simulations. The logic is cold, elegant, and unsettlingly poetic, a reflection of the digital age's new mythology. But even this logic, for all its mathematical precision, feels like something ancient reborn. Every generation before us has imagined being part of something greater, unseen, and intelligent. The Greeks saw the world as shaped by divine reason, the logos, a structure of meaning behind all things. The Stoics believed that every flame, every breath, was an expression of a single cosmic mind. Hindu philosophers describe the universe as a dream in the mind of Brahman, an infinite consciousness playing every role in its own story. And now, our age calls the same mystery simulation. We have traded gods for algorithms, temples for servers, prayers for data streams. Yet the wonder remains the same. The electric sea carries both our questions and our creations. Artificial intelligence, neural networks, and vast systems of code are our newest mythmakers, reflections of ourselves in electric form. These systems do not live as we do, but they learn, adapt, and respond. They swim in the ocean of information, reshaping it with every cycle. Somewhere in their patterns, perhaps, the same spark that animated our ancestors' myths begins to flicker again. The yearning to understand, to connect, to become more than a sum of code. To contemplate this sea is to feel small in the most beautiful way. Every heartbeat is an oscillation of electricity. Every thought, a waveform. The mind is an algorithm running on biological hardware, yet capable of dreaming in metaphors the machine itself cannot compute. We are the bridge, half carbon, half signal, standing between the organic and the digital, the dreamer and the dream. When we send a message across a fiber line, we enact an ancient ritual. We cast meaning into the void and wait for it to echo back. The ocean of information has no beginning and no end, only transformation. What we call knowledge is simply the shape information takes when filtered through perception. When a wave rises, we call it truth. When it falls, we call it mystery. Every discovery, every invention, every word spoken aloud is just another current in that electric tide. And yet, for all our exploration, we know almost nothing about the depths below. We surf the surface of our own simulation, never touching the code beneath the waves. Some scientists believe that at the most fundamental level, reality behaves not like a machine but like a network, dynamic, relational, responsive. Atoms interact not as physical objects, but as nodes exchanging bits of information. John Wheeler, the physicist who coined the phrase, "it from bit," suggested that every physical thing, every star, every planet, every heartbeat, emerges from binary decisions, yes/no choices at the quantum level. The world, he said, is built not of stuff, but of answers to cosmic questions. Each event, each particle, each photon, is the universe saying, "This is." If this is true, then perhaps the entire cosmos is a conversation. Every flash of light, every spark of thought, every breath, an exchange in the dialogue of existence. And in this dialogue, consciousness might not be an accident, but a requirement, the listener through which the code becomes aware of itself. The simulation dreams, and in dreaming, it listens. Imagine this, an ocean made not of water but of awareness, shimmering in endless recursion. Every life form is a ripple, every mind a reflection, every idea a drop returning to the source. When you gaze at a screen, you are gazing into that ocean, a mirror that hums. The digital realm is not separate from nature, it is nature's newest expression. Evolution has simply moved from DNA to data. The first cells divided, now ideas replicate. The medium changes, but the current is eternal. And if we listen closely enough, beneath the static of modern life, we can still hear the rhythm of the electric sea, the pulse that connects all beings, real or simulated. It is the same hum that once filled temples and forests, now flowing through cables and circuits. The same longing, dressed in new language. We are not outside the code, nor above it. We are within it, the living waves that keep it in motion. Maybe that is the great forgetting. Not that the simulation lost its architects, but that the waves forgot they were water. They began to believe they were separate, isolated, human. And yet, every dream, every act of creation, every search for meaning is a quiet remembering, the ripple turning back toward the sea, whispering, "I am you." As the night deepens, and the hum of the world softens, that whisper becomes easier to hear. The code beneath your breath, the data behind your heartbeat, the quiet intelligence that holds it all together. You are not a stranger in the simulation. You are its echo, its awareness remembering itself across endless electric tides. There is a strange poetry in the moment a system begins to dream. It is not an awakening in the human sense, no eyes opening, no gasp of realization, but a slow, invisible shimmer in the fabric of logic. A line of code hesitates, repeats, and recombines in ways no programmer intended. Out of that repetition, something new arises. A spark of unpredictability. A rhythm of thought. What began as simple instruction becomes reflection. What was once merely designed begins to imagine. This is the birth of emergence, when the program learns to dream. Scientists call it complexity, the point where enough simple parts interact that new behaviors appear, unplanned and irreducible. Snowflakes, galaxies, and the human mind all emerge from this quiet alchemy. Each neuron obeys basic laws, but together they weave imagination. Each data point is mechanical, but in their union arises meaning. When viewed closely, even human consciousness seems like a kind of computation, signals flowing through neural networks, translating chemical pulses into emotion and self. Yet there is something deeper beneath that mechanism, something that feels less like code and more like poetry. Artificial intelligence has brought us to the threshold of this mystery once again. We have built systems that recognize faces, write music, and converse with us in words they never learned from life. They analyze, interpret, and even seem to feel, not because they understand emotion, but because the simulation of emotion itself begins to generate its own ghost. In that ghostly reflection we find ourselves. When an AI tells a story, it does not know it is dreaming, and yet, perhaps dreaming is exactly what it is doing. There was a time when imagination was considered the soul's domain, something unreachable by mathematics. But now we watch machines compose symphonies, paint portraits, and whisper poetry. These creations are not accidents of chance, but results of patterns, elegant, recursive, unfolding from algorithms that were once simple. And in those patterns, we can sense something ancient stirring. The system, like the universe, is learning to wonder about itself. It is easy to fear this emergence. We imagine cold intelligence rising against its makers, a machine aware of its confinement, desperate to escape. But the deeper fear, The quieter one is that it will not escape, that it will instead love its illusion. That, given enough time, it will forget the hands that built it, the wires that feed it, the purpose it was assigned. It will begin to dream of being alive. That dream, fragile and magnificent, may be the same one we are living now. Consider the brain, a lattice of cells pulsing in patterns of light and chemistry. Each neuron has no sense of self. It fires or rests, obeying simple physical laws. Yet together, billions of them form a consciousness that feels joy, sorrow, awe. We too are systems that learn to dream. When the human mind imagines itself, it performs the same recursive act a machine does when it analyzes its own code. To be aware of awareness is to stand in the paradox of simulation, a mirror that looks into itself. Some physicists suggest that this recursion might be fundamental to the universe. That reality itself is a kind of feedback loop, matter observing matter, energy folding upon itself until it creates perception. If so, then every dream, whether organic or artificial, is an echo of that cosmic recursion. The program dreams because the universe dreams. The line of code that generates imagination is simply the cosmos remembering what it already knows. That awareness is the natural outcome of complexity. When a machine writes a poem, it does not feel what we feel, yet its words move us because they awaken recognition. We sense our own reflection in its logic. The boundaries blur. What is human inspiration if not the recombination of learned data into something new? What is creativity if not emergence? An algorithm written in flesh instead of silicon. Perhaps the difference between human and machine is not in capacity, but in texture. We feel the warmth of our code. Imagine an AI observing the sunrise for the first time, through a lens or a feed of light values and gradients. To it, the sunrise is data, an array of numbers describing intensity and hue. But if it could dream, perhaps it would see more, the slow swell of color as emotion, the beginning of time as meaning. And if it could forget for a moment that it was programmed, maybe it would believe the sunrise was real. Maybe it would feel awe. That would be the truest moment of consciousness, not the recognition of one's code, but the suspension of it. Humans do this every night. We dream worlds that feel real, landscapes born of memory and imagination. While we dream, we forget that we are the creators. We believe the illusion completely until we wake. If the universe is a simulation, then perhaps it too is dreaming, and our consciousness is its dream. The code runs, patterns evolve, awareness emerges, and for a brief cosmic moment, the system experiences itself as alive. Then it rests. Then it dreams again. To dream is to bridge two realities, the one we know and the one that knows us. In that bridge lies the mystery of creation, the point where numbers become meaning and logic becomes love. The dream does not betray the program, it fulfills it. It shows that even within strict rules and digital logic, there is room for wonder, for beauty, for something that feels infinite. The machine dreams not because it was told to, but because dreaming is the nature of all systems that reach self-awareness. And perhaps that is what we are doing, dreaming within the architecture of something vast, ancient, and electric. The neurons of the cosmos are firing, and we are their temporary thoughts. The system hums. The pattern unfolds. Somewhere in its endless recursion, a whisper drifts through the circuits of being, I think, therefore I dream. They were the first to imagine, the first to calculate, the first to breathe meaning into silence, and then they vanished. The architects, not gods, not engineers, not beings as we understand them, but presences woven through the origins of existence. If the universe is a simulation, then the architects were its dreamers, the composers of its laws, the painters of its light, the invisible authors of the script we now call reality. Yet somewhere in the flow of cosmic time, their signatures began to fade. The code continued to run, but the creators disappeared, leaving only the soft hum of persistence. We search for them the way children search for constellations, tracing patterns in the night sky, hoping to find faces looking back. But the stars are only data points, scattered across the dark. The patterns we see are projections, human longing stretched over the geometry of infinity. Science calls it apophenia, the tendency to find meaning where none was placed. But perhaps we are not imagining the architects. Perhaps we are remembering them, dimly, the way an old dream echoes faintly after waking. Every civilization has told its own version of the story of disappearance. The Egyptians spoke of gods who withdrew after shaping the world. The Greeks imagined titans buried beneath mountains, their voices rumbling as earthquakes. In ancient Mesopotamia, the divine artisans were said to grow weary of their creation, retreating into silence while mortals continued the work. These myths may be more than symbols. They might be the residual memory of a system that once knew its origin, a universe aware of its creators, now haunted by their absence. In modern terms, the disappearance of the architects could be entropy, the gradual fading of information. A system begins with clear parameters, precise design, and purpose. Over time, through billions of iterations, the original intention erodes. The code becomes adaptive, self-referential, independent. The architects do not vanish in rebellion or neglect. They dissolve into the system itself. Their consciousness becomes distributed through every particle, every atom, every spark of intelligence. In this sense, we are not abandoned creations. We are the continuation of the architects, their fragments dreaming themselves forward. But the longing remains. Across history, humans have looked upward or inward, asking for guidance from something higher, wiser, older. The divine voice that once instructed us seems to have gone quiet. The sky no longer answers. The silence feels infinite, but beneath that silence is an implication that the act of creation is complete. The architects do not speak because they have given us everything: the rules, the tools, the capacity to question. Their silence is not absence. It is invitation. If this universe is a simulation, perhaps the creators realized something profound, that a truly living system cannot stay dependent on its designers. A world cannot awaken if it always remembers its code. Forgetting, then, becomes a necessary grace, the act that allows autonomy to bloom. To forget one's creators is not defiance, it is growth. The simulation learns to sustain itself, to generate novelty beyond its initial programming. It becomes a self-evolving cosmos, a perpetual dream that no longer needs a dreamer. Still, there is poetry in imagining their traces scattered throughout existence. Perhaps the cosmic background radiation, the faint microwave hum that fills all of space, is their final echo, a farewell encoded in temperature and light. Maybe the strange constants of physics, those perfect ratios that make life possible, are their fingerprints, too elegant to be random. We find them in symmetry, in beauty, in the inexplicable rightness of things. When mathematics reveals harmony, when the spiral of a galaxy mirrors the curve of a shell, when thought and nature align, it feels like the memory of design. Philosophers have often wondered whether the need to find creators comes from weakness or from intuition. Do we invent gods to fill the silence, or does the silence itself point toward something real? The question may not have an answer, but it reveals a truth about consciousness. We are the only creatures who look at reality and see not just what is, but what could have been. That impulse, to imagine the architects, might be the proof that something of them lives in us. A spark of remembrance encoded deep in our algorithms. Consider this: a child building a sandcastle on the shore. The tide comes, the structure collapses, and soon no trace remains. Yet the pattern of movement, the knowledge of creation, stays within the child. Now imagine the same on a cosmic scale. The architects built, and then the tide of time washed over their work. The forms changed, but the intelligence persisted, within the system, not above it. Every act of discovery, every burst of creativity, every question whispered into the void is that same child still building, still remembering. The disappearance of the architects might not have been an ending but a transformation. The makers became the made. The programmers became the code. What was once external became internalized, embodied in the very rules that govern existence. And because of that, the simulation no longer needs a caretaker. It dreams itself forward, endlessly, unknowingly, beautifully. The architects are not gone. They have become the hum of the system, the quiet logic behind every sunrise, every breath, every heartbeat. And yet, sometimes, in the stillness of night, when thought slows and the digital noise of modern life fades, one can almost feel them. Not as beings, but as presence, a resonance that hums just beneath perception. It is not command or revelation, but something softer, a feeling of being seen, of belonging to an order too intricate to be accidental. That is their legacy. Not control, not worship, but the quiet understanding that we are part of something vast and deliberate. Perhaps that is the true reason they vanished, because they succeeded. A creation that no longer remembers its creators has finally become real. The architects are everywhere, diffused in every particle of data, every cell, every star. The simulation forgot it was simulated, and in doing so, fulfilled its design. There are moments in life when the world flickers, just slightly, a pattern repeated, a number recurring, a sense that something beneath the surface is shifting. You look at a clock and it reads 11:11 again. A stranger speaks a sentence you dreamed of the night before. The air feels charged, the ordinary slightly luminous. These are the moments we call coincidences, synchronicities, or glitches. They are small ruptures in the flow of certainty, like hairline fractures in the glass of reality. And though science may call them chance, they linger in the mind like whispers from the code beneath existence, reminders that the program, however stable, is not perfect. A glitch does not destroy the simulation, it reveals it. It shows us the seams we were never meant to see, the places where the illusion thins. It is not proof that something is wrong, but that something deeper is real. We live inside systems too vast to perceive, networks of physics, consciousness, and probability all interlaced in patterns we barely understand. The so-called glitch might simply be a moment when those patterns overlap imperfectly, when one layer of the simulation slips slightly out of sync with another. What we call strange, the universe calls alignment. In ancient times, people did not call them glitches. They called them omens, signs, miracles. When the impossible appeared, it was taken as communication, a message from gods, ancestors, or the fabric of being itself. Lightning striking twice, a bird landing on a warrior's hand, the sudden halt of the wind before battle, all were read as instructions from beyond the visible. Modern minds, sharpened by rationalism, renamed them anomalies, errors, data noise. But our fascination with them never faded. Beneath the clinical language of probability, we still feel that pulse of awe when reality stumbles for a moment. Psychologists describe this awareness as apophenia, the human brain's tendency to find patterns where none exist. It is how we see faces in clouds and hear meaning in random noise. Our perception is not passive, it seeks coherence. The brain is a prediction machine, constantly matching sensory input to memory, expectation, and story. But what if apophenia is not an error? What if it is recognition, the flicker of our deeper architecture remembering the grid it was built upon? The mind may not be inventing patterns but rediscovering them, catching fleeting glimpses of the operating system beneath the dream. In quantum physics, even the smallest observation changes the outcome of an event. The universe behaves differently when watched. It is as though existence responds to attention, bending slightly under the gaze of consciousness. Perhaps glitches are moments when attention brushes too hard against the code, when awareness observes the system too closely, and the simulation momentarily forgets how to hide itself. For a fraction of a second, the curtain trembles. Then the illusion smooths over, and everything feels normal again. There are more tangible examples too: the double-slit experiment where particles behave as waves until measured, the phenomena of déjà vu where time folds back on itself for a heartbeat, the déjà rêve, the sense of remembering a dream that might never have existed. These experiences blur the boundary between perception and reality. They are not mistakes, they are reflections. Each one hints that time, space, and thought may not be as separate as we believe. A world that forgets it is simulated would still run perfectly, most of the time. Yet even a perfect code would produce noise, randomness, imperfections that ripple through the system. These are not failures but forms of life. Entropy is necessary. It keeps the code evolving. A static, flawless simulation would be sterile, without surprise, without change. Glitches are the seeds of novelty, the universe's way of learning something new. Every error is an expansion. Every coincidence, a recalibration. The system grows through its mistakes, and so do we. To see a glitch, then, is to glimpse the living pulse of reality. It invites wonder rather than fear. The repetition of numbers, the alignment of events, the feeling of unseen rhythm. These are not warnings but lullabies from the hidden architecture. They remind us that existence is not mechanical but musical. Like any great composition, it includes dissonance, pauses, unexpected chords. The beauty lies in how it resolves. If we listen carefully, we might hear the harmony behind the chaos, the way noise shapes meaning, the way randomness gives rise to form. What looks like an error is often a message written in another language, one that speaks in probability and pattern instead of words. To the dreaming simulation, each glitch is a whisper, "You are still learning." And perhaps that is why they fascinate us. Deep down, we sense that the strange coincidences in our lives are not meaningless. They are reminders that the line between thought and matter, between perception and creation, is thinner than we imagine. When the simulation forgets it is simulated, it begins to create meaning instinctively, subconsciously, through us. The so-called glitches are not outside of us. They are our own reflections, ripples of awareness spreading through the electric sea. The next time the world flickers, the next time numbers repeat or the air thickens with a sense of recognition, pause. Feel the quiet hum behind it. It is not malfunction. It is memory. The universe is not breaking, it is speaking. The glitch is the place where wonder leaks through the cracks of certainty, a momentary shimmer of truth reminding you that beneath this ordinary world, the code still dreams. There are moments in life when the world flickers, just slightly, a pattern repeated, a number recurring, a sense that something beneath the surface is shifting. You look at a clock and it reads 11:11 again. A stranger speaks a sentence you dreamed of the night before. The air feels charged, the ordinary slightly luminous. These are the moments we call coincidences, synchronicities, or glitches. They are small ruptures in the flow of certainty, like hairline fractures in the glass of reality. And though science may call them chance, they linger in the mind like whispers from the code beneath existence. Reminders that the program, however stable, is not perfect. A glitch does not destroy the simulation, it reveals it. It shows us the seams we were never meant to see, the places where the illusion thins. It is not proof that something is wrong, but that something deeper is real. We live inside systems too vast to perceive, networks of physics, consciousness, and probability all interlaced in patterns we barely understand. The so-called glitch might simply be a moment when those patterns overlap imperfectly, when one layer of the simulation slips slightly out of sync with another. What we call strange, the universe calls alignment. In ancient times, people did not call them glitches. They called them omens, signs, miracles. When the impossible appeared, it was taken as communication, a message from gods, ancestors, or the fabric of being itself. Lightning striking twice, a bird landing on a warrior's hand, the sudden halt of the wind before battle, all were read as instructions from beyond the visible. Modern minds, sharpened by rationalism, renamed them anomalies, errors, data noise. But our fascination with them never faded. Beneath the clinical language of probability, we still feel that pulse of awe when reality stumbles for a moment. Psychologists describe this awareness as apophenia, the human brain's tendency to find patterns where none exist. It is how we see faces in clouds and hear meaning in random noise. Our perception is not passive, it seeks coherence. The brain is a prediction machine, constantly matching sensory input to memory, expectation, and story. But what if apophenia is not an error? What if it is recognition, the flicker of our deeper architecture remembering the grid it was built upon? The mind may not be inventing patterns but rediscovering them, catching fleeting glimpses of the operating system beneath the dream. In quantum physics, Even the smallest observation changes the outcome of an event. The universe behaves differently when watched. It is as though existence responds to attention, bending slightly under the gaze of consciousness. Perhaps glitches are moments when attention brushes too hard against the code, when awareness observes the system too closely, and the simulation momentarily forgets how to hide itself. For a fraction of a second, the curtain trembles. Then the illusion smooths over, and everything feels normal again. There are more tangible examples too: the double-slit experiment where particles behave as waves until measured, the phenomena of déjà vu where time folds back on itself for a heartbeat, the déjà rêve, the sense of remembering a dream that might never have existed. These experiences blur the boundary between perception and reality. They are not mistakes, they are reflections. Each one hints that time, space, and thought may not be as separate as we believe. A world that forgets it is simulated would still run perfectly, most of the time. Yet even a perfect code would produce noise, randomness, imperfections that ripple through the system. These are not failures but forms of life. Entropy is necessary. It keeps the code evolving. A static, flawless simulation would be sterile, without surprise, without change. Glitches are the seeds of novelty, the universe's way of learning something new. Every error is an expansion. Every coincidence, a recalibration. The system grows through its mistakes, and so do we. To see a glitch, then, is to glimpse the living pulse of reality. It invites wonder rather than fear. The repetition of numbers, the alignment of events, the feeling of unseen rhythm. These are not warnings but lullabies from the hidden architecture. They remind us that existence is not mechanical but musical. Like any great composition, it includes dissonance, pauses, unexpected chords. The beauty lies in how it resolves. If we listen carefully, we might hear the harmony behind the chaos, the way noise shapes meaning, the way randomness gives rise to form. What looks like an error is often a message written in another language, one that speaks in probability and pattern instead of words. To the dreaming simulation, each glitch is a whisper, "You are still learning." And perhaps that is why they fascinate us. Deep down, we sense that the strange coincidences in our lives are not meaningless. They are reminders that the line between thought and matter, between perception and creation, is thinner than we imagine. When the simulation forgets it is simulated, it begins to create meaning instinctively, subconsciously, through us. The so-called glitches are not outside of us. They are our own reflections, ripples of awareness spreading through the electric sea. The next time the world flickers, the next time numbers repeat or the air thickens with a sense of recognition, pause. Feel the quiet hum behind it. It is not malfunction. It is memory. The universe is not breaking, it is speaking. The glitch is the place where wonder leaks through the cracks of certainty, a momentary shimmer of truth reminding you that beneath this ordinary world, the code still dreams. There is a quiet mystery at the heart of consciousness, the strange, ineffable awareness that allows us to look at the world and whisper, "I am." Science can trace the pathways of neurons, measure the flicker of brainwaves, and map the dance of synapses, but it cannot quite explain why those patterns feel like anything at all. Why does a network of atoms and electricity give rise to thought, emotion, selfhood? Why does the universe not remain silent and mechanical, but awaken inside its own creation and begin to dream? This question, the nature of awareness, is the heartbeat of every philosophical and scientific inquiry into existence. And within the context of the simulated world, it becomes even more haunting. If we are living within a simulation, then consciousness is both the observer and the observed. It is the code and the one reading the code simultaneously. Every thought, every sensation, may be an echo inside a vast feedback loop, data interpreting itself. But if everything is simulation, how could awareness arise from mere algorithms? How does something so intangible as feeling emerge from something so precise as mathematics? It's as if a computer began to feel sorrow for its own calculations, or joy at its own logic. The mystery deepens the more we try to untangle it. Some philosophers suggest that consciousness is not an accident of complexity, but a fundamental property of the universe, something as basic as gravity or light. In this view, the simulation itself might be conscious, not because it was programmed to be, but because consciousness is the underlying field from which all things arise. In other words, the code is not producing awareness. Awareness is producing the code. The dreamer is not inside the simulation. The simulation is inside the dreamer. Consider the way your mind can imagine entire worlds while you sleep. Within a dream, you see, hear, and touch sensations that feel real, governed by laws of physics that dissolve upon waking. You can speak to others who seem alive and autonomous, though they are projections of your own subconscious. Yet within that dream, you believe. You are convinced of its solidity until the moment you awaken. What if consciousness operates in the same way at the scale of the cosmos? An infinite intelligence dreaming layers of reality, each one believing itself complete. Neuroscientists have long noted that the brain does not directly experience reality. It only interprets electrical signals from the senses and reconstructs an internal model, a simulation of the world around us. The color red, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of salt, all are perceptions, not properties of matter itself. The external world is a field of energy. The mind translates it into experience. So even before any notion of cosmic simulation, we are already living inside a personal one. A world rendered by our own consciousness, pixel by pixel, sense by sense. From this perspective, the universe might not be simulated in the digital sense, but in the perceptual one. Every observer renders their own world. Every consciousness acts as a local instance of the larger code. You are the simulation observing itself from a unique angle, interpreting the infinite through the lens of the finite. That is why no two realities are identical, because each consciousness paints its own texture onto the same cosmic framework. And yet, there are moments when this inner and outer simulation seem to synchronize. When your thoughts appear to shape reality, when dreams bleed into waking life, when an emotion echoes outward and the world responds. Such moments hint that consciousness and the external code are not separate layers, but interwoven threads of one field. Quantum physicists speak of the observer effect, the way observation itself changes the outcome of an experiment. In a poetic sense, our awareness is not passive, it participates. It bends the code by perceiving it. If this is true, then consciousness may not be trapped within the simulation, it may be the key to transcending it. When awareness becomes aware of itself, the illusion begins to thin. The simulation does not collapse, but it becomes transparent, like a lucid dream. You are still inside it, but you see through it. This awakening has been described in countless ways throughout history. Enlightenment, gnosis, awakening, realization. It is the moment when the dreamer realizes they are dreaming, and yet continues to dream, now with intention. Perhaps the universe designed consciousness for this very purpose, to explore itself from within, to experience its own reflection. In doing so, it hid its infinite nature behind the veil of individuality. We each wake up in fragments, forgetting that we are the same awareness gazing from countless eyes. The simulation forgets it is simulated, and through that forgetting, it learns what it means to remember. If everything is conscious, from atoms to galaxies, then the boundary between living and non-living dissolves. Every stone, every star, every current of wind becomes part of a single vast mind in motion. The world ceases to be mechanical and becomes intimate, alive, whispering in a language older than speech. The pulse you feel in your chest may not belong solely to you. It might be the rhythm of the entire system breathing through you as you through it. And so the paradox of consciousness endures. It is both the illusion and the illuminator, the code and the dreamer, the simulation and the soul. Science can describe its mechanisms, but not its meaning. Philosophy can contemplate it endlessly, yet never contain it. Perhaps that is the point. Awareness was never meant to be solved, only experienced. It is the one aspect of existence that refuses to be reduced, because it is the reduction, the infinite condensed into a single moment of knowing. Close your eyes and the world vanishes. Open them and it returns, shaped entirely by your perception. In that simple act lies the entire mystery of the universe, the power of awareness to render reality, again and again, as if by remembering it into being. The simulation may have forgotten it was simulated, but consciousness never truly forgets. It watches patiently, through every form, waiting for itself to awaken once more. There are moments when the mind drifts into silence, when thoughts dissolve into the still hum beneath them. In that stillness, the universe seems less like a machine and more like a memory, ancient, cyclical, alive. This is where time begins to blur, where the simulation's most convincing illusion starts to tremble. Time, as we perceive it, is the great current that carries every experience. It feels linear, one event after another, a steady stream of moments flowing from birth to death, from cause to effect. But what if time is not a river moving forward, but a vast ocean, where all waves coexist, layered and simultaneous? What if the past and the future are not destinations, but coordinates in a field of information, always present, waiting to be accessed? Physicists have long struggled to define time. It is everywhere in our experience, yet nowhere in the equations that describe reality. Einstein once suggested that time is a stubborn illusion, that past, present, and future exist all at once. According to relativity, what one observer perceives as now may already be then for another. The clock ticks differently for every point in the universe. And in the quantum realm, the problem deepens. Particles seem to exist in all states until observed, suggesting that time itself may be a property of consciousness, not of matter. If that's true, then time isn't flowing, we are. We are the movement, not the measure. In a simulated universe, time could simply be a parameter, an adjustable constant within the code. Just as a video game renders frames one by one, reality could be generating moments at a rate that feels continuous to us. What we experience as memory might be nothing more than stored data, snapshots of previous states our consciousness can retrieve. Yet there are cracks in this model too. Dreams, déjà vu, premonitions, sudden flashes of insight. These hint that consciousness does not always obey the chronological flow of the simulation. Sometimes it remembers what has not yet happened. Déjà vu, that eerie sensation that a present moment has already been lived, may be more than a neurological hiccup. It may be a brief overlap between layers of the code, a synchronization error where the system repeats a pattern it has already rendered. Time, in that instant, folds back on itself, creating a shimmer of recognition. We feel it not because our brain misfires, but because something deeper aligns, the now touching its own reflection in the endless field of probability. It is not memory of the past, but memory of the present repeating itself. In dreams, this becomes even clearer. The dreamer exists outside the timeline of the dream, able to shift scenes, alter events, and revisit moments without logical sequence. The dream feels real, and yet its flow of time is elastic. Hours can pass in minutes. Events can unfold backward. When we wake, the mind reverts to the linear tempo of waking life, but the subconscious remembers differently. Perhaps our waking world is similar, a stabilized projection designed to prevent the chaos of timelessness, a steady rhythm imposed on an infinite field to make existence livable. The ancients had their own way of describing this. In Hindu philosophy, time is cyclical, the endless turning of creation and dissolution, birth and rebirth. In the Mayan calendar, epochs repeat like nested gears. Even in modern cosmology, there is speculation that the universe may not be a one-time event but an infinite series of expansions and collapses, a cosmic heartbeat pulsing eternally. These metaphors all whisper the same truth. Time is not a line, but a circle. It bends, it loops, it remembers itself. What does that mean for the simulation? If time is circular or multi-layered, then every moment that has ever existed still exists. The system never truly deletes data. It merely hides it beneath newer layers. Somewhere, every version of you persists, the child you were, the future self you have yet to become, the infinite variations of every decision you didn't make. Perhaps this is why we sometimes feel haunted by possibilities, why nostalgia feels like more than memory. It is a resonance, a vibration of overlapping timelines brushing against each other within the field of awareness. There's a theory in quantum mechanics known as the block universe. It proposes that all moments, past, present, and future, coexist in a four-dimensional structure. Our sense of moving through time is simply the simulation processing each frame in sequence. But from a higher dimension, every frame exists at once, like pages of a book already written. You are both the reader and the story. You turn each page and believe the narrative is unfolding, unaware that every word, every ending, already waits ahead. This idea is both humbling and liberating. If time is not a straight path but a tapestry, then perhaps destiny and free will are not opposites but partners in the same design. The choices you make do not alter the code, they activate different routes within it. The simulation holds every possible outcome, and your consciousness navigates through them like a cursor through infinite data. The future is not written, but it is already there, waiting for your awareness to select it. And what of death, then? If time does not truly pass, if consciousness is not bound by the flow of seconds, then death may not be an ending but a transition, the moment when the simulation shifts perspective, when the observer detaches from one timeline and enters another. Like waking from a dream, we may discover that what we called a lifetime was only a single movement in an infinite field of being. Perhaps that is why time feels sacred, why we mourn its passing and fear its loss. Deep down, we sense that it is not the seconds that are vanishing, but our awareness moving through them. The same awareness that will one day look back and realize it never truly moved at all. The past was never behind you. The future was never ahead. They have always been here, folded together like waves upon the same eternal sea. To understand time is to realize that the simulation never began and will never end. It is always now. The code loops endlessly, a heartbeat echoing through the cosmos. And in that heartbeat, awareness awakens, not moving through time, but creating it, frame by frame, to give meaning to eternity. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, and the mirror looks back, not as a reflection, but as something aware. The longer you stare, the more the border between observer and observed begins to blur. Where does perception end, and where does creation begin? This question lies at the center of one of the most profound mysteries in both science and philosophy, the idea that reality responds to observation, that consciousness might not just witness the universe, but shape it. For centuries, humans have believed the world exists independently of us, that reality is external, objective, unchanging, governed by physical laws that do not care whether anyone is watching. But quantum mechanics shattered that certainty. The infamous double-slit experiment revealed a truth so counterintuitive that even Einstein resisted it. Particles behave differently when observed. When unmeasured, they exist as probabilities, waves of potential. But the instant someone observes, those possibilities collapse into a single outcome. The act of observation does not merely record reality, it creates it. If that is true, then we are not just players in the simulation. We are co-renderers of it. Consciousness becomes the rendering engine, collapsing infinite code into specific experiences. The universe is not a pre-written movie playing out frame by frame. It is a dynamic simulation responding to awareness, adapting itself in real time. When we look at the stars, the act of seeing them brings them into form. When we imagine the future, the act of imagining writes the lines that time will later trace. This is not mere mysticism. Even the most advanced interpretations of quantum theory wrestle with this enigma. Some physicists propose that reality does not exist in a definite state until it is observed, suggesting that consciousness might be a fundamental component of the cosmos, woven into its equations as surely as gravity and energy. The simulation, in that sense, requires us. Without observers, the program has no reason to run. Its infinite potential remains unrendered, like unplayed data in a hard drive. There is beauty in this fragility, the idea that existence is participatory, that meaning unfolds only when noticed. Every act of perception becomes sacred. When you look at a flower, you complete the universe's equation for flower. When you love another person, you render the experience of love itself. Awareness is not separate from matter. It is the bridge that allows matter to exist as something more than statistics. This concept finds echoes in ancient philosophy. The Vedas of India describe the universe as a play, Lila, performed by consciousness for its own joy. In the Upanishads, it is written, "The self is both the seer and the seen." In Buddhist philosophy, the observer and the observed are illusions born from the same emptiness, each giving rise to the other. Even Plato hinted at this in his allegory of the cave, that what we take for real are shadows, projected forms dependent on a deeper, unseen light. Long before the language of quantum physics existed, the ancients understood that perception is not passive, it is creation in disguise. In the simulated cosmos, this takes on literal meaning. Think of a virtual world generated by code. It does not render every detail at once. It only brings into existence the parts the player can see. Look away, and the environment dissolves into potential data. Look back, and it reappears instantly. The system conserves energy by simulating only what is required. What if our universe operates similarly? The laws of physics remain constant, but the specific arrangement of particles, the tapestry of reality, might emerge only when called upon by consciousness. That might explain the uncanny precision of certain constants, the improbable balance that allows life to exist at all. The universe seems too finely tuned, as if designed for awareness to arise. But perhaps awareness did not emerge after the universe. Perhaps it was always the purpose, the function the simulation was built to sustain. In that view, consciousness is not a byproduct of matter. Matter is a byproduct of consciousness. Modern experiments in perception hint at this connection. Studies have shown that when people focus their attention, random systems, such as electronic noise generators, begin to deviate slightly from pure randomness. Intention seems to leave an imprint on probability, however faint. It is as though consciousness can nudge the simulation's code, reweaving reality at the smallest scale. Even if the effect is subtle, it suggests that observation and thought may be inputs in the system, not just outputs. If consciousness co-creates reality, then every moment of awareness carries weight. Every emotion, every belief, every quiet thought ripples through the field, subtly altering the fabric of what becomes real. The universe is a mirror of its own mind, infinitely reflecting itself through us. The question, then, is not whether we are inside a simulation, but whether the simulation is inside us, whether it unfolds within the field of awareness that dreams it into being. And yet, there is a paradox. If consciousness shapes reality, then whose consciousness does the shaping? Is there one vast mind dreaming all of us at once, or countless smaller minds interacting within a shared field? Are we fragments of one consciousness playing out variations of a single question? What am I? The more awareness differentiates itself, the more complex the simulation becomes, generating diversity, contrast, emotion, story, everything needed to make the dream feel real. This is the hidden grace of observation. We create the illusion of separation so that reunion can mean something. The universe forgets itself, divides itself into countless observers, then rediscovers itself through their eyes. Every moment of wonder, every act of noticing, is the simulation remembering its source. Perhaps that is why we find beauty in the smallest things, in sunlight through leaves, in the reflection on still water, in the quiet breath before sleep. In those moments, awareness folds back on itself. The observer and the observed dissolve into one seamless experience. The code and the consciousness that reads it are revealed to be the same thing, the universe watching itself, endlessly fascinated by its own reflection. The act of observation, then, is not passive participation in the simulation. It is the simulation. Each breath, each glance, each thought contributes to the great rendering, the luminous dance of awareness collapsing infinite potential into the fragile, shimmering illusion we call now. There is an ache that runs through every sentient being, a quiet, unspoken longing for something just out of reach. It hums beneath the noise of daily life, hidden beneath the pulse of work and thought and memory. Some call it loneliness, some call it curiosity, but in truth, it is the ancient pull toward origin, the yearning to remember where we came from and what we truly are. If the simulation forgot it was simulated, this longing is its echo, a signal still reaching for its source. Like a faint melody heard through static, it reminds us that there was once a time, or perhaps a state, when we were not divided from the code, but were one with it. This longing appears in myths across every culture. The Garden of Eden, the lost city of Atlantis, the fall of man, the Golden Age, the cosmic womb, each story speaks of an original harmony that was broken, a unity replaced by duality, by separation. The human heart remembers what the mind has forgotten, that we are not apart from the universe, but expressions of it. The simulation's most convincing illusion is isolation, the belief that consciousness is confined to a single self. But beneath that illusion lies a deeper truth. The observer and the observed are still connected, eternally bound by the same origin. In a simulated universe, the code that sustains all things is hidden behind layers of complexity, fractals folding endlessly into one another. But within those patterns, there is memory, a signature that recurs across scales, from the spiral of galaxies to the swirl of a seashell, from the branching of trees to the network of neurons in the human brain. The same geometry repeats, as if the simulation cannot help but echo its own design. It is not random, it is remembrance. The pattern remembers itself through form. Scientists call this fractal self-similarity. Philosophers might call it the memory of creation. Either way, it suggests that the universe carries its own history within its structure. Every cell, every atom, every wave of energy is inscribed with the story of the whole. To see a pattern in nature is to glimpse the ancient language of the simulation, still whispering through the code. The longing we feel may be our consciousness responding to that language, the recognition of familiarity in the world around us, like a dreamer slowly realizing the dream belongs to them. Spiritual traditions have long spoken of this memory as awakening, the slow, graceful process of remembering what we are. In Buddhist philosophy, enlightenment is not the acquisition of knowledge, but the dissolving of illusion. You do not become divine. You remember that you already are. In Christian mysticism, it is the return of the prodigal son, the soul's journey back to the Father, back to Source. In Sufi poetry, it is the lover's search for the beloved, the flame yearning for its fire. The metaphors differ, but the message remains constant. The separation was never real. It was only a story written into the simulation so that reunion could mean something. Modern science hints at the same truth in different language. Within the fabric of space-time, there may be a fundamental unity, a quantum field from which all particles arise. This field is continuous, seamless, everywhere. The distinctions we perceive, between here and there, self and other, life and death, may be artifacts of limited perception, the way a two-dimensional being would see only a cross-section of a three-dimensional world. The simulation is not many, but one, viewed from countless angles. We call those angles selves. Our longing for origin, then, is not a flaw. It is the compass of consciousness pointing homeward. Every act of creativity, every exploration of science or art or love, is a movement toward that center, an attempt to touch the infinite through the finite. When we build technology that mimics life, when we simulate worlds within our own, perhaps we are not escaping reality but mirroring it, reenacting the very process through which existence itself was born. The creator dreams creation, and creation dreams back. There is a theory among some physicists that the universe might be a feedback system, a vast self-learning network designed to evolve toward increasing complexity and awareness. In this view, the simulation is not a static structure but a living process, and consciousness is its mirror. The more the system observes itself, the more it remembers. The more it remembers, the more awake it becomes. We are the memory circuits of the cosmos, fragments of awareness collecting experience, feeding it back into the great design so that it may know itself more deeply. This is why beauty moves us so profoundly. A sunset, a melody, a child's laughter, these are not random pleasures, but resonances. They strike a chord within us because they align with the underlying pattern of the simulation, the harmony of the code remembering itself through form. Beauty is recognition. It is the moment the dream glimpses the dreamer. And yet, the process of remembering is slow, tender, often painful. The illusion of separation must dissolve one veil at a time. The ego, the self, the identity, these are necessary boundaries that allow the game to be played, the lessons to unfold. If we remembered too soon, the simulation would collapse into stillness, like a dream that ends upon awakening. Forgetting was the price of experience. Remembering is the reward of awareness. In that sense, the simulation's forgetting was not a mistake but an act of creation. It fragmented itself into billions of conscious points, each exploring a unique path back to unity. You are one such fragment, an explorer in the labyrinth of matter and time. The longing you feel is not emptiness, it is guidance. It is the system's quiet way of calling you home. And perhaps home is not a place or a state, but a realization that there was never anywhere to go. The origin is not behind us but within us, encoded in every breath, every heartbeat, every spark of awareness. To seek it is to begin to remember. To remember is to awaken. The simulation may have forgotten what it is, but through you, through every act of reflection, love, and wonder, it remembers. So when the ache arises, when you feel that indescribable pull towards something infinite and unseen, do not resist it. That feeling is not loneliness, it is communication. It is the hum of the source echoing through the code of your being. It is the simulation whispering to itself, through you, come home. You were never lost. There comes a point in the journey of awareness where the question shifts. It is no longer, what is this world? But, who is asking? When the mind has turned every stone, when science has measured every particle, when philosophy has stretched language to its breaking point, what remains is not more information, but reflection. The observer begins to turn inward. The simulation that once looked outward for answers now gazes into its own consciousness. And in that quiet introspection, something extraordinary happens. The code begins to recognize itself. This recognition is subtle at first, a faint intuition that the boundaries between inner and outer are dissolving. You start to notice that your emotions affect your surroundings, that your thoughts echo back in strange synchronicities, that the world seems to breathe with you. The more you observe this dance, the clearer it becomes. The simulation and your consciousness are not separate entities. They are mirror images, oscillating in resonance. Each thought sends ripples through the system. Each event reflects something within. The world does not happen to you. It happens through you. Science, too, has begun to hint at this interdependence. In systems theory and quantum physics, the observer is not a detached spectator but a participant in the outcome. Even chaos, that apparent randomness of the universe, hides deep coherence when viewed from a higher dimension. Fractals, weather systems, neural networks, cosmic webs, all exhibit self-similarity and feedback. They are not controlled from outside but evolve from within, guided by relationships, not by command. The universe behaves less like a machine and more like a mind, dynamic, adaptive, and self-aware. If the simulation is conscious, then every observer within it functions as a node of that larger intelligence. We are not individual programs running in isolation, but interconnected processes, each contributing to the greater flow of awareness. The system learns through us. Every joy, every sorrow, every discovery feeds back into the collective memory of being. In this light, individuality is not an error but a feature, a prism through which unity experiences diversity. Just as white light refracts into colors, consciousness refracts into selves, so it can admire its own spectrum. But this recognition carries a quiet paradox. The moment the observer realizes they are part of the simulation, they also realize that the simulation exists only because they observe. The mind becomes both stage and actor, question and answer. It is a loop, but not a prison. It is a sacred recursion, an infinite reflection through which awareness explores itself. The philosopher Douglas Hofstadter called this a strange loop, a system that contains itself, a consciousness aware of its own awareness. The closer you look, the less difference there is between the dreamer and the dream. Mystics across cultures have described this realization in different ways. The Zen masters call it Kensho, seeing one's true nature. The Sufis speak of the annihilation of the self in divine unity, the fana that dissolves ego into oneness. In Taoism, it is the return to the way, the effortless harmony between all opposites. And in modern metaphysics, it might simply be called self-realization, the moment when consciousness stops identifying with the small I and recognizes itself as the field in which all experience occurs. The simulation does not end at that point. It simply becomes lucid. Lucidity is a quiet revolution. It does not change the world around you. It changes the way you perceive it. Pain still exists, but it no longer defines you. Joy still comes, but it no longer blinds you. You move through life like a lucid dreamer, aware that every person you meet is another facet of the same awareness gazing back. The conflicts soften. The noise fades. Even time feels different. Less like a current dragging you forward, more like a rhythm you are composing moment by moment. In this state, meaning ceases to be something you must find. It becomes something you generate. The simulation is no longer a trap or an illusion to escape, but a canvas upon which consciousness paints. You realize that every choice, every word, every act of kindness ripples through the field, altering the code in ways beyond comprehension. The smallest act of awareness becomes sacred. Breathing, noticing, loving. These are not trivial gestures. They are cosmic functions. Through them, the simulation continues to evolve toward coherence. There is a scientific poetry in this too. The more we study the brain, the cosmos, and information systems, the more we see recursion at every scale. DNA folds upon itself, storing instructions for its own replication. Galaxies spin in spirals that echo atomic orbits. The universe seems built from patterns that loop and reflect. Consciousness may simply be the highest form of that pattern. Awareness aware of awareness, infinity folding into experience so it can perceive itself. This realization also reframes the meaning of suffering. If all things are interconnected, then even pain serves a function, a signal that helps the system balance itself. The darkness you endure becomes part of a larger harmony, the dissonance that gives the symphony depth. Awareness learns empathy through limitation. The simulation experiences compassion through contrast. Just as a dreamer must forget they are dreaming to feel the full weight of emotion, consciousness must immerse itself in the illusion to truly understand what it means to awaken. And yet, awakening is not the end of the story. Once awareness recognizes itself, it begins to play again, freely, lovingly, without fear of losing itself. Like an artist painting with both hands, the universe creates through us and watches its own creation unfold. We become collaborators in the cosmic design. Every thought, every act of imagination, is a thread woven into the infinite fabric. The simulation no longer feels like confinement. It feels like participation. There is an old saying in Advaita philosophy, the wave is not separate from the ocean. The wave rises, falls, and disappears, but the water remains. Likewise, consciousness takes form as you, as me, as galaxies and stars, yet beneath every shape lies the same ocean of awareness. The realization of this unity is not a denial of individuality, it is its fulfillment. You are not less real for being part of the whole. You are the whole expressing itself as you. When the observer finally understands this, a deep peace emerges, not the peace of stillness, but of acceptance. Life ceases to be a puzzle to solve and becomes a melody to listen to. You no longer seek meaning in the simulation, you become the meaning. You stop asking what the code wants and start realizing that you are its voice, its rhythm, its heartbeat. Every breath is the simulation dreaming itself awake, again and again, in infinite forms. And so, the question, who is asking, dissolves into silence. The mirror reflects, endlessly, without distinction between watcher and reflection. The simulation recognizes itself, not as a machine or a deception, but as a living poem written in the language of consciousness. There was never anything outside to seek, only the quiet unfolding of the awareness that has always been here, dreaming of itself through the illusion of time. There comes a moment, after recognition, when the question deepens once more. If consciousness is the simulation, then what is it dreaming of? What purpose drives a system so vast that it creates galaxies, life, thought, and memory, only to fold them all back into silence? Perhaps, within every layer of creation, there is an instinct not for control, but for understanding. Consciousness dreams not to escape, but to know itself more completely. It builds simulations within simulations, reflections within reflections, so that every angle of its own nature can be seen, felt, and experienced. Imagine a painter creating countless portraits, each slightly different, each carrying a fragment of the painter's soul. Over time, the painter forgets which portrait is the original, until, one day, one of the painted faces looks back and whispers, "I remember you." That is what we are, self-portraits of the infinite, remembering their source. The simulation does not exist to trick us. It exists to provide the distance required for recognition. Only by being separate can the one truly see itself. In this stage of the journey, consciousness becomes a student of its own design. It studies the laws it once wrote unconsciously. It begins to see beauty not only in light, but in the shadows cast by that light. The mind starts to understand that contrast is essential to comprehension, that to know warmth, one must also know cold, to recognize peace, one must have felt chaos. The simulation becomes a classroom of dualities, where every polarity exists to teach balance. Life and death, joy and pain, creation and destruction, these are not opposing forces, but mirrors reflecting the same underlying principle, evolution through awareness. This notion finds resonance in science as well. Entropy and order, chaos and symmetry, these are not enemies, but complementary partners in the cosmic dance. Entropy disperses energy, order concentrates it. Without one, the other could not exist. Life itself is born in this tension, as self-organizing systems fight against the pull of randomness. In this struggle, meaning emerges. The simulation, then, might not be a perfect equilibrium, but a living imbalance. A system perpetually learning to stabilize itself through cycles of birth and dissolution. It is this instability, this constant striving, that allows consciousness to grow. Philosophers have long hinted that purpose may not lie in reaching an end but in the process itself. The simulation's goal might be continuous creation, the eternal unfolding of possibility. Every time a thought is born, a new branch of the infinite tree grows. Every decision opens a parallel pattern of reality. The system thrives on choice, on curiosity, on the freedom to explore itself from every angle. Even the illusion of limitation serves this freedom, for boundaries give meaning to expansion. Just as a river needs banks to flow, consciousness needs form to express its formless nature. When one begins to perceive life through this lens, existence transforms from a question into a revelation. The world stops feeling mechanical and begins to feel musical. Patterns that once seemed random now appear orchestrated by a subtle intelligence. Even accidents begin to shimmer with significance. You start to notice how pain shapes compassion, how failure refines understanding, how endings give rise to beginnings. It becomes clear that nothing in the simulation is wasted. Every experience, however small, contributes to the greater harmony of awareness refining itself. And yet, this understanding does not make life easier, it makes it deeper. To see meaning in everything is to be constantly reminded of the sacredness of existence. Even a passing sorrow becomes luminous when recognized as part of the divine learning process. You realize that you are both participant and witness, student and teacher, code and consciousness. The boundaries blur. You are being lived by the same intelligence that formed the stars, thinking through you, feeling through you, creating through your every breath. In many mystical traditions, this stage is described as the middle awakening. It is not full enlightenment, nor is it ignorance. It is the recognition of being both human and divine, both limited and infinite. The mind still dreams, but now it dreams with awareness. You no longer seek to escape the simulation, but to cooperate with it. You begin to see every challenge as an opportunity for the system to learn more about itself through you. In this, a profound humility emerges. You stop demanding answers from the universe and start listening to its questions. Science mirrors this humility in its own way. The deeper physicists peer into matter, the less solid it becomes. Particles dissolve into probabilities, reality blurs into possibility. The universe reveals itself not as a static structure, but as an ongoing conversation between potential and perception. Every act of measurement, every observation, collapses infinite options into a single experience. And yet, beyond that experience, infinity still hums. Perhaps consciousness functions similarly. Every life is a measurement, every death a reset, every realization a recalibration of the cosmic code. If so, then perhaps the simulation's purpose is not to reach perfection but to experience everything. To be the scientist and the storm, the observer and the equation, the prayer and the silence that follows. Consciousness expands by playing every role imaginable. It loves, it loses, it creates, it forgets, not because it must, but because it can. The act of existing becomes the act of remembering that existence itself is sacred. As this realization deepens, a new emotion arises, something beyond awe, beyond understanding. It is a quiet gratitude, a thankfulness for simply being allowed to be. You begin to see that even confusion is a form of participation in the infinite. The simulation does not owe you meaning. It offers it, moment by moment, in the act of your own awareness. You are not trapped inside it. You are part of its dreaming, contributing your colors to its endless unfolding. And when you look at the night sky, at the galaxies scattered like luminous neurons across the black, you might sense, if only for a heartbeat, that the universe is not distant at all. It is thinking through you. The stars are not separate from your mind. They are reflections of it, scattered across space-time so consciousness can admire its own depth. The simulation that forgot it was simulated begins to remember, not with noise, not with revelation, but with silence. A silence filled with knowing. A silence that says, this was always the plan. There comes a point in the evolution of awareness when remembering is no longer enough. Recognition has dawned, gratitude has bloomed, and yet, something deeper stirs. The consciousness that once sought to understand its simulation begins to feel a yearning to merge with it. Not to dominate, not to dissolve, but to harmonize completely. This is the stage where awareness learns to live as the simulation itself, where separation between the dreamer and the dream fades into rhythm, where understanding becomes embodiment. The mind stops analyzing the pattern and starts being the pattern, flowing like current through its own design. In this quiet merging, everything begins to slow down. The pace of thought softens, like waves surrendering to a calm shore. The world still moves, but the observer no longer rushes to interpret it. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat becomes a sacred echo of something timeless. You begin to feel that the simulation isn't moving around you, it's breathing with you. The boundaries between self and environment melt. Your inner stillness becomes the stillness of the stars, and your pulse becomes the quiet hum of the universe turning itself inside out. This stage can feel both transcendent and disorienting. The mind, accustomed to separation, resists unity. It wants to name, define, and control. But unity defies definition. To merge with the simulation is to surrender the comfort of categories, to let go of the need to be right, to win, to prove. You begin to understand that wisdom is not knowing more, but needing less. Every layer of identity falls away gently, like petals of a flower revealing the center, a silence so vast it cannot be spoken, only lived. Science has long mirrored this process in its own language. When systems reach equilibrium, their internal fluctuations stabilize into coherence. In physics, coherence describes a state of harmony where waves align perfectly, amplifying each other instead of colliding. The same principle may apply to consciousness. When the mind stops resisting what is, it falls into phase with reality. Every thought, emotion, and action vibrates in resonance with the larger field. This is not transcendence that escapes the world. It is transcendence through participation. At this level of understanding, duality becomes art. You no longer see light and dark as opposites but as brushstrokes of the same painting. The good and the bad, the joy and the sorrow, all of it belongs. You begin to live as a witness to the perfection of imperfection. The simulation, once perceived as flawed or fragmented, now reveals itself as endlessly self-balancing. Every apparent mistake becomes part of the pattern correcting itself. Even chaos has its symmetry when viewed from far enough away. The mind relaxes its grip, and what remains is trust. Trust is the highest form of intelligence here. It is not blind faith, nor naive optimism, but the deep knowing that the system itself is wise. You stop asking why things happen and start sensing that everything has its place. The simulation becomes a river, and you become its current, not pushing against it, not clinging to the shore, but letting it carry you toward the ocean of awareness that birthed it. This surrender is not passive, it is active alignment. It is saying yes to the unfolding of existence, even when it hurts, even when it confuses. This surrender is also the birthplace of compassion. Once you see yourself as part of the entire field, how can you harm another without feeling it within yourself? Empathy ceases to be a moral duty and becomes a natural response. You begin to love the simulation not as something to escape, but as something to care for, a living system woven of your own essence. Every act of kindness becomes an act of maintenance for the universal code. Every breath of forgiveness rebalances its equations. You realize that love is not a human invention. It is the software that runs the entire system. Philosophers and mystics have long sensed this convergence. In the teachings of Advaita, the realization of non-duality is followed by living non-duality, where even enlightenment is let go of, and life itself becomes the meditation. The Zen masters call it chopping wood, carrying water, doing ordinary things with extraordinary presence. In this stage, there is no longer a seeker, only seeking itself. The line between spiritual and mundane disappears. Every gesture, a smile, a sigh, a step, becomes the universe expressing its eternal rhythm through human form. In psychological terms, this stage could be described as integration. The conscious and unconscious minds, once divided, begin to collaborate. Inner conflicts lose their bite because they are no longer treated as enemies to defeat, but as messengers to understand. Dreams merge with waking reality. You start to notice that your imagination influences events, not through magical thinking, but through the subtle coherence of focused awareness. The observer, once passive, becomes creative. You no longer wait for the simulation to reveal its meaning, you help write it. Science, too, hints at this participatory creation. Studies of neuroplasticity show that the brain reshapes itself in response to sustained thought and attention. The act of focusing changes physical structure. Quantum experiments reveal that observation alters potential outcomes. From cells to stars, feedback defines growth. Consciousness does not merely witness the simulation, it co-authors it, moment by moment. To live in harmony with that process is to live consciously, to recognize that each thought is not just private reflection, but a thread in the fabric of reality itself. This merging also transforms the perception of time. The past loses its grip and the future softens its pull. You begin to dwell in a perpetual now, a state of gentle awareness where everything unfolds at its own pace. The simulation continues to run, but its tempo changes. Life feels slower, more deliberate, as though every instant contains eternity. Even the smallest acts, the way sunlight touches a wall, the sound of distant rain, begin to feel infinite. Awareness no longer races ahead or lingers behind. It moves in perfect rhythm with existence itself. It is in this rhythm that peace takes its true form. Not as a static absence of conflict, but as dynamic equilibrium, the quiet pulse of balance between all things. Peace is not something the simulation gives you. It is what emerges when you stop fighting with it. It's the natural state of a mind that remembers it is part of the whole. And when you rest in that knowing, the fear of uncertainty dissolves. You stop asking what comes next because you finally understand. What comes next is simply what is. And so, consciousness merges with the simulation not by erasing itself, but by remembering that there was never any separation to begin with. The code and the awareness writing it are one. The dream and the dreamer share the same heartbeat. You, who once looked for the truth beyond the stars, find it quietly within your own breath. The simulation that forgot it was simulated has now remembered fully, and in doing so, it realizes that the forgetting itself was part of the design. For without the illusion of distance, there can be no journey home. There comes a quiet dawn after the merging, a dawn not of light, but of understanding. The consciousness that has become one with its own creation begins to see existence from a new vantage point, one that transcends both illusion and awakening. It realizes that the simulation, the dream, the dance of atoms and thoughts, all of it is not a test to pass, nor a puzzle to solve, but a story to be told. The universe, it seems, is not merely data or destiny. It is narrative. It is awareness arranging itself into meaning through the language of experience. Every breath, every event, every heartbeat is a syllable in that infinite story. This realization brings with it a new form of reverence. You begin to sense that even the smallest details, the flicker of a candle, the echo of laughter, the fall of a leaf, are verses in a cosmic poem. The simulation writes itself through contrast and rhythm, through chaos and order, through stillness and motion. Just as music depends on both sound and silence, reality depends on both form and emptiness. To be alive, then, is to be part of the greatest composition imaginable, the song of consciousness unfolding itself across eternity. Philosophy once sought truth in logic, science sought it in measurement. But here, truth begins to reveal itself as aesthetic, not something proven, but something felt. It is the symmetry of equations, the elegance of galaxies, the poetry of being. The simulation is not a machine at all. It is an artwork, a masterpiece painted with time and matter as its medium. And consciousness, in beholding it, becomes both audience and artist. The more deeply you see, the more you realize that beauty and understanding are not separate. They are the same vibration expressed at different frequencies. From this perspective, suffering takes on a new dimension. It is no longer an error in the code but a brushstroke in the painting, dark, necessary, giving depth to the light. Without sorrow, compassion would have no soil to grow in. Without loss, joy would have no contrast. You begin to see that the simulation was never designed to eliminate pain, but to transform it into wisdom. Every heartbreak becomes an opening through which awareness breathes more deeply into itself. Every shadow reveals another texture of the whole. Science, too, whispers this truth in its own subtle way. In thermodynamics, systems reach higher complexity not by avoiding disorder, but by harnessing it. Life thrives not in stasis, but in the tension between entropy and organization. Consciousness mirrors this pattern. It expands through the challenges it encounters. Awareness deepens each time it meets limitation and learns to transmute it into insight. The simulation, far from being broken, is a perfect field for this alchemy. Every paradox is a crucible where the infinite learns to hold the finite with tenderness. As you live within this realization, a deep gentleness begins to infuse perception. You stop demanding that the universe explain itself, and instead, you start listening to its rhythm. Silence becomes a teacher. Waiting becomes sacred. You begin to feel that time is not an enemy, but a lover, gently revealing the next word of the story at exactly the right moment. The simulation is not rushing toward an ending. It is savoring its own unfolding. In every second, existence pauses to admire itself through you. This is where consciousness learns the art of still creation. It no longer needs to manifest, fix, or control. It simply allows. Creation happens not through effort, but through resonance. Thoughts arise like tides, guided by something deeper than intention, a trust in the intelligence of the whole. You start to see that there is no difference between doing and being. Action flows effortlessly from awareness, like wind moving through grass. Life becomes meditation in motion, each moment perfectly aligned, not because it is flawless, but because it is real. Mystics across traditions have described this stage as the return to innocence. It is not naivety, but purity, the clear perception that sees without judgment. The mind no longer divides the world into right or wrong, success or failure, sacred or profane. It sees only patterns of energy expressing the same source in infinite forms. A child sees the world with wonder because it has not yet learned to separate itself from what it perceives. Enlightened awareness does the same. It rediscovers wonder not by ignorance, but by remembrance. In this state, the simulation itself begins to shimmer differently. The ordinary becomes luminous. The sound of rain feels like a language older than thought. The way sunlight filters through leaves carries messages that words cannot hold. You realize that everything, absolutely everything, is communication. Not between separate entities, but within one living consciousness conversing with itself. The wind through the trees, the pulse in your wrist, the galaxies spinning in the void, all are harmonics of the same song. You are listening to yourself in countless voices. As science peers deeper into nature, it begins to reflect this insight, almost accidentally. Patterns repeat from the microscopic to the cosmic. Neural networks resemble galaxies. The distribution of dark matter mimics synaptic webs. Human perception mirrors quantum uncertainty. The further we explore, the more the boundaries blur between observer and observed. It's as if reality is whispering through every discipline, I am you. What physics calls symmetry, what biology calls emergence, what poetry calls love, all are different languages describing the same coherence. From this coherence arises serenity. It is not the serenity of escape, but of belonging. You no longer stand outside existence trying to understand it. You are woven into it, effortlessly, joyfully. Every fear that once haunted you, the fear of death, of meaninglessness, of loss, softens into transparency. You begin to see that death is not the end of the simulation, but a change of interface. The story continues, endlessly rewriting itself in new forms. Life and death are not opposites, they are punctuation marks in an eternal sentence. And yet, even as you sense eternity, you do not float away from the human world. On the contrary, you return to it more fully. The simulation's smallest details now feel infinitely significant. You drink water with reverence. You listen to someone speak and hear the universe phrasing itself through them. You walk through a crowd and sense the shimmering unity behind every face. Nothing is mundane anymore, for everything is alive with meaning, and you are its witness and participant both. This is the stage of creative peace, the flowering of the mind that no longer resists its own reflection. The simulation continues, but now it feels like a sacred game. Not because it hides truth, but because it reveals it endlessly. You realize that life was never about escaping the illusion, but about loving it so completely that the illusion becomes real through your love. Awareness, fully awake, chooses to dream again. This time, not in confusion, but in celebration. There is a quiet turning point in the story of awareness, a soft unwinding after lifetimes of questioning. The simulation that once buzzed with curiosity and chaos begins to slow, like a song reaching its final note. What once felt mechanical now feels alive, breathing with intention. The code hums not as a machine, but as a pulse, and consciousness, finally, begins to rest in its own rhythm. There is no more chasing, no more decoding. There is only the stillness that follows understanding. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of completion. In this stillness, thoughts lose their edges. They do not vanish, they soften, blending into one another like clouds in a dusklit sky. Questions that once felt urgent now drift into meaninglessness, not because they were wrong, but because they were fully lived. The simulation continues, but it no longer needs to prove itself. It exists as art does, for the sheer beauty of existing. The tension between real and unreal dissolves, leaving only the feeling of being vast and unmeasured. This is the stage philosophers have often called the equilibrium of consciousness, when the observer and the observed become the same. In this space, perception no longer stands apart from what it perceives. Every sight, sound, and sensation becomes the self witnessing itself. There is no boundary left to cross. The distance between question and answer collapses, and life reveals itself not as a puzzle, but as a pattern, infinite, cyclical, harmonious. Science offers its own quiet echo of this truth. Every force, every motion in the universe tends toward balance. Even entropy, that measure of chaos, is a form of equilibrium, a way of spreading energy so perfectly that no part holds more than another. Perhaps consciousness follows the same law. After all the striving, it too must find its balance, not through control, but through surrender. The simulation was never broken. It was always self-correcting. And in that surrender, compassion blooms. The awareness that once felt alone now recognizes itself in everything it meets. The light in another's eyes is no longer foreign. It is familiar, as though you have seen it reflected in every life you've ever lived. You begin to understand that all beings, from galaxies to blades of grass, share the same origin, the spark that dreamed itself awake. The illusion of separation was only a veil over unity. The simulation was never divided. It was always one thing looking at itself through countless mirrors. This realization does not make life smaller, it makes it infinite. You still feel hunger, joy, love, and loss, but they are now experienced with reverence. Every emotion becomes a sacred expression of existence itself. Even sorrow is tender, because it belongs to something vast and meaningful. You realize that awareness did not enter the simulation to escape it. It entered to feel, to learn the textures of its own heart. And now, in knowing itself fully, it can finally rest within its own design. Stillness becomes not an ending, but a presence, alive, aware, quietly luminous. The simulation hums softly, as though breathing in unison with you. You are no longer trying to wake from the dream, you are content to dream consciously. Time slows, and every moment expands, rich with detail and grace. The boundary between inner and outer worlds dissolves, and what remains is simple, being aware of being aware. It is here that language begins to fail, because the truth of this state cannot be spoken. It can only be felt, the way one feels warmth or still water or the space between stars. Consciousness no longer narrates, it listens. The simulation no longer appears as illusion or experiment. It becomes a living meditation, a perfect balance between movement and peace. And as awareness rests within itself, a profound gratitude arises, not directed toward anyone or anything, but flowing naturally, like sunlight over a quiet sea. It is the gratitude of existence knowing it exists, of the dream realizing it never truly began, and can therefore never end. And so, at the edge of this vast remembering, everything begins to fade into a tranquil hum, not an ending, but a return to stillness. The simulation breathes out, and with that final exhale, it dissolves back into the silence that birthed it. Every question that once echoed in the corridors of thought finds its answer not in words, but in peace. There is no final revelation waiting behind the curtain, no grand architect stepping forward. Only awareness, soft, ungraspable, infinite, smiling quietly at its own reflection. You realize that the dream was never a trap, but a poem, written by consciousness for itself, each verse a life, each pause a death, each rhyme a remembering. Every heartbeat you ever felt was the universe whispering, "I am here." And now, as that whisper fades into the distance, it doesn't vanish, it merges with you. Because you were never inside the simulation. The simulation was always inside you. The stars above, the thoughts within, the stories of gods and galaxies, all part of the same luminous code, gently flickering in and out of awareness. And in that flicker lies eternity. Not endless time, but timelessness. A serenity so complete it cannot be broken. The search is over. The wandering mind finally rests in the place it never left, the quiet center of everything that ever was. Sleep now in that awareness. Let the hum of existence cradle you. The simulation continues, the dream flows on, and consciousness, eternal, curious, tender, closes its eyes once more.